Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Martin Dreyfuss Show. Welcome back to kind of the beginning of our coverage of the Israel-Gaza war. I haven't spent too much time here, mostly because there's a lot of political tension, and I sit more in the center, so I don't really want to piss everybody off. There's no real winning in that. I don't think it's okay to be killing civilians in Palestine. I don't think it was okay to take hostages. I've seen posts of Hamas using encampments to send missiles. So there's so many nuances with this war. I've tried to stay away from it. But the reality is it's a global issue, and I'm at a point where I'm willing to talk about it, mostly because the Biden ceasefire plan, which I don't really support Biden, I don't really support Trump, not happy with any candidate we have, but this ceasefire plan is good. This ceasefire plan would get rid of all the hostages. It would rebuild Gaza. It would allow the civilians to return to their home, and it would stop the war. So that's what I want. I hope to God that that's what everybody wants, is the war to stop, people to stop dying, civilians to be able to live their normal everyday life, and no one be kept hostage, no one be bombed. Families who now have dead family members get their remains back. That all sounds great. So that's my stance. I'm going to leave it at that. But for right now, we need to get into the news because Benjamin Netanyahu dissolved his war cabinet. The war cabinet was designed to keep balance. It consisted of Gantz, Gallant, and Netanyahu. Gantz resigned on June 9th, and now Netanyahu has dissolved the war cabinet. Gantz resigned because he demanded that Netanyahu figure out a plan to get to a ceasefire and a plan for, the day after the war for Gaza. And he failed to do that by Gantz's deadline. Netanyahu failed by Gantz's deadline of June 8th, so he resigned on June 9th. Now, the government's still in action, all that's still there, but the reality is we don't know how much control, at least I don't know how much control now does Benjamin Netanyahu have over the war, and how far is he willing to escalate it. So without any further ado, let's get right on into the news.
Let's return to that breaking news this morning out of Israel. Reuters news agency and Israeli media reporting that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now dissolved the country's war cabinet. Our senior correspondent Margaret Evans is leading a CBC News team reporting from Israel right now. She's at the Kerem Shalom crossing right on the Israeli-Gaza border. So, Margaret, we go to you for analysis of this move by Netanyahu. It was expected after Benny Gantz resigned, but tell us a little bit more about the announcement and the decision and what its implications are.
As we get into this, I find it very cool that the reporter on the right here is at the crossing point between the border, right on the lines. That's where she's shooting this right now. So I don't know much about the area. Obviously, I live in Phoenix, Arizona, Tempe, Arizona. So I don't know much about the area, but it seems like she's very much so on the ground and very much so a part of the situation. And from reporter to reporter, at least when I report, I don't consider this reporting, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of respect for that.
Well, it was expected, as you say, Heather. It was something I think that the Israeli Prime Minister was trying to avoid. That is the resignation of Benny Gantz and, of course, Gadi Eisenkot as well. These are both former military men who joined the emergency government in those days after October 7th. So the announcement that the dissolution of the war cabinet is not a surprise. It does shift things a little bit politically. People are wondering what it means for Netanyahu's nationalist religious coalition partners who've been putting a lot of pressure on him. They were actually demanding to be given access to be able to be on that war cabinet, in the war cabinet. This is seen as somewhat of a
So, for those of you who don't know, Netanyahu aligned or realigned with very orthodox, I think, like traditional, like old school, far right, I guess is the word they use, Israeli people who want, I would think, to regain access of the temple that is theirs. And they haven't had access to it for a long, I think, centuries. I don't know the full exact history, but I think that's what that party looks for. And the fear is that if he takes a strict alliance with those people, this war's escalation will, I don't know about exponentially, but it will increase. So I don't know if that's where he's headed, because she said that he wasn't happy that Gantz resigned. Gantz resigned, Netanyahu didn't fire him. I think that's the important distinction here. So we still have to wait to see what the next steps are. If it was Netanyahu fired Benny Gantz and the Nationalist Party is in the war cabinet, that would be, I think, a much more scary and dangerous story. However, just the fact that Gantz resigned due to his demands not being met about a ceasefire in the post-war era, I think that although it is a big story and the cabinet dissolving is a big story, I don't think it means anything definitive as of this moment.
buff to them, although the government is saying it's not going to change anything. Sensitive decisions is how Israeli officials are describing it, will be taken by the Prime Minister and smaller groupings, and some discussions with the wider security cabinet. We actually are down here at Kerem Shalom because the Israel Defense Forces allowed a few journalists down to talk about aid distribution into Gaza, but it gave me the chance to ask the chief Israel Defense Forces spokesman, Daniel Hagari, what impact he thought this would have. He said absolutely no impact. He said, we have the defense minister, we have a change of command, the cabinet makeup comes and goes, said basically wouldn't have an impact on Israel's prosecution of the war.
So again, that's pretty gray, right? Like, because we don't know where Israel stands. There's a clear ceasefire plan laid out by Biden that almost looks too good to be true in a sense, but would be the ideal solution here. And it seems like both sides, for one reason or another, haven't wanted to accept it. Now, I know they both have hinted at accepting it, but there's always a but, it seems like, from what I've read personally. And if you see it a different way, please let me know. I'm open to all perspectives. That's why I'm here, is to get educated, hopefully for not just me and everyone who watches, just to get more educated, get a better understanding on these issues. But him saying it doesn't change how Israel will prosecute the war on Gaza does not mean whether that will continue escalation or de-escalation. In my opinion, that doesn't give us any answer. But it's good that she asked, and I appreciate her telling us what he said, but it's not an answer.
I think what we'll be watching for is what the impact is politically on Mr. Netanyahu, whether or not these ministers in his coalition, Itamar Ben-Gvir, hard right security minister, whether they'll be demanding more of him. They've been demanding a much more aggressive military campaign in Gaza. That, of course, has made Washington unhappy. And this week is a week that protesters here in Israel have designated as a week of major protest against the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. They want to see him resign. They want a deal, a ceasefire that will see the Israeli hostages released. And they're trying to bolster as much pressure as they can this week.
So that's the question, man. Can the United States flex enough muscle to put this to an end? And if they don't, will the United States continue to fund both sides of the war? Because we fund most of Israel's military. I know we give them a ton of money, and I know we're funding humanitarian aid in Gaza. So it's like we're funding the missiles to blow up the buildings that we're then paying to rebuild. So like, what's our next move here? We've kind of intertwined ourselves in a cycle that will just hurt us, it seems like, in the long run as a country. And that's a selfish perspective. That's not the perspective of people don't need to be dying anymore. That's just the perspective of America. What are we going to do going forward? Because we've asked for what we wanted. And at a certain point, you can only ask so many times before you keep enabling what's going on, right? We all know what we would prefer to happen. And if that's not going to happen and there's nothing America can do about it, do we keep enabling what's going on is the question.
Margaret, where you are, right there at the Kerem Shalom crossing today, one of the main entry points for aid into Gaza. The Israeli military saying it's now enacting daily tactical pauses to allow more aid in. So what are you seeing there, and what are you hearing in terms of allowing for more humanitarian relief?
Well, we were shown a lot of pallets of food sitting around. We were given a briefing by the Israeli military as well. They say this will make a difference in the amount of aid that is allowed into the Gaza Strip or gets into the Gaza Strip. They say they're not blocking that aid distribution. They throw the blame on the international community, saying they're not able to distribute it once it gets in. So this is their suggested solution to that. It is creation of a corridor, if you like, and they're guaranteeing the corridor, the safety of that corridor for aid trucks to get from the southern end of the Strip, which is where I am right now, further north. It's a tactical pause, they say, between early morning, about 8 p.m. at night, but it's only for that strip. And it did cause quite a bit of controversy here because those far-right cabinet ministers that I was talking about they didn't like the idea of this tactical pause.
Well, obviously, that's a very smart thing to do, and that shows, I think, signs of de-escalation. Tactical pauses in fighting to allow to get food, to allow them to get aid. So that to me shows whoever's decision it was that they at least have a little bit of care about the civilians, right? Like, if they wanted to commit a full-blown genocide, they wouldn't be bringing food in, I don't think. So if they actually are making pauses, I'm not there, so I don't know, but if they are making pauses and bringing in aid throughout the day, in between fighting, if you will, then I think that goes to show that they're trying to get civilians what they need, but fight who they need to fight. But I mean, a lot of news says otherwise, and like she said, there's the far-right cabinet members who are literally saying, we don't want to give them aid, we want to escalate this thing. So maybe there's also an internal battle in Israel. Not even maybe, there definitely is an internal battle in Israel about what they want to do. And it's not clear to say who wants to escalate this. But some people do in Israel and some people don't. And I don't know anything about Hamas. I mean, what they want to do. And, you see, again, the signs that they want ceasefires. But then you see you see the language, the photos and pictures of them launching missiles out of, civilian tents. And you also see conditions that international community members have said are unrealistic to meet. So with all that being said, it seems like a lot is going on there. We got a little bit longer, so if you are down to stick around, let's keep on going.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said he hadn't been told about it by the Israel Defense Forces. They say that's not true. So there's a lot of, confusion around it. One of the things we were seeing here was an attempt by Israel's Defense Forces to get across the message that it is not stopping the fighting, that despite this corridor that it's going to create, fighting will continue. They will continue to go after Hamas, including at Rafah, which of course is not far again from where we are now. So a lot of confusion around it, but it is, not to forget, a real problem for Gazans. We have the international community again saying that unless they get this together, we're going to be seeing those reports again of mass hunger and potentially starvation.
And that's the sad reality of it all. Like, everyone's pointing fingers, but the aid doesn't actually get there. That's what I don't understand. Like, Israel's pointing fingers at each other. Israel's pointing fingers at the international community. The United States is just saying the aid's not getting there, but they built a strip for aid to get there, a pier that I think collapsed. How did that collapse? Like, there's so many intertwined questions that we just don't have the answers to. And my only hope is that civilians are protected and safe, because war is a decision by governments, not by people. And that's just how I feel about that. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for getting educated. Thanks for watching the news. Have a great day.